What's up, YouTube? Today I want to talk a little bit about music theory. So I'm going to start with the very, very basics. So for those who are more like advanced with music theory and stuff, you may want to skip to a little bit further on in the video or just skip this video in general. But I think there's a lot of stuff that can really help those who are starting out with kind of getting to grasp of what a lot of the stuff is, why it works, or at least just my perspective on it. I'm not a music theory expert by any stretch of the imagination, but over the years I've kind of figured out a bunch of little tricks to kind of, let's say, fake it. So yeah, I want to show you guys a bunch of those tricks today and where to start for those who are beginners in music production. Let's dive in and have a look. So first things first, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of a root note. So in traditional music, the root note would be the kind of like bass, or I say bass, B-A-S-E, like the kind of foundation of the piece of music. So let's say, for example, you're in a band, the root note would be the note that all of the instruments are kind of circling around. And I think in terms of music production, a lot of guys might argue with me for different genres and different styles of music, but I think having a root note is quite important to have a kind of sort of foundation for the track, which everything can kind of like fit into. And yeah, for some parts of the track, you can have stuff that's completely atonal and completely random. But I think, again, it's good to have this kind of root note to kind of like return to, especially with something like dance music where you've got like a kick and bass and various kind of like rhythmical elements. A lot of the time you want those to kind of fit together in terms of the pitch. So again, like I said, for those who are more advanced in music theory, you might want to skip this part or skip this video in general. But I think it's important for those who are getting into music for the first time to understand, why it's important to, either pick a root note or use specific methods to find one that you think suits the track the best, and to kind of stick with that. And obviously you can use melodies and chords and all sorts of stuff on top of that, but for those who are more beginners, I think it's important to try and get everything to sound good in the root note before trying to experiment and take things too far. I want to show you guys a couple of examples of why it works and why it doesn't work and that kind of thing. So here I've got a kick and bass and percussion kind of loop that I've put together. The bass is in G and the kick is also in G. And I want to add in a synth. I'm going to go with a Vital preset from my preset bank, which I've released recently. And I'm going to try remember to post a link over here for those who want to check out this preset pack in more detail. So I've got a sound here. It's basically an FM sound that's kind of based on different parameters. At every note, it randomly generates a couple of filter parameters and stuff. But I think this is a cool sound to kind of outline the importance of a root note and that kind of thing, because, it sounds good at a static pitch. So generally speaking, I mean, a lot of the time for beginners, we generally learn things, say, for example, in the key of C, because, logically, if you look at the piano roll, everything kind of starts on a C, and, it just seems like the logical thing. So if we put in a bunch of notes here, I'm just going to randomly put in notes. And let's say, for example, play this alongside this kick and bass, which is in G. It does kind of work for various reasons, but it's going to sound so much better if, for example, this key correlates to the key of the kick and the bass. So let's detune this down to a G and listen to what the example is. And I think, what the daunting thing, what kind of like confuses a lot of producers getting into things for the first time is, we're often trying to like overcomplicate things with the MIDI and do all sorts of complex things to kind of like maybe learn more or to kind of like flex a little bit. But often these things end up kind of sounding out of key and all sorts of things because maybe we didn't understand fully what's going on with the music theory side of things. So I think, it's, as you can hear, just straight off the bat, just simple randomly generated gate pattern with just the key that's in the root, it sounds good. You know, you don't necessarily have to be super complex with your key and your scale and all sorts of stuff like that, especially with dance music, you know. What I want to do is I want to find another example here. I want to maybe find a pad that we can put in. And again, I want to kind of like nail in the idea of why it's so much more powerful to kind of pick a root note and stick with it than to try to be very complex with scales, unless you really know what you're doing, which I'm going to teach you a few hacks for later on in the video. So don't be too discouraged. So let me just find a pad that I think will work here. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to put this into the root note, let's say a G. But remember, for those who don't understand, you know, how sort of the keys of a piano works and what octaves are, the octave of a sound will always work with the root note. So let's say, for example, we've got this pad which we've put in here. You know, like I said, this might seem like obvious stuff for those who know a little bit about music theory, but I kind of want to help those who don't a little bit. So let's just solo this here. So the sound is cool, but we want to go a little bit lower. So instead of changing it to a pitch which might not work with the scale and all sorts of stuff, because we technically don't know what we're talking about hypothetically, so let's just go all the way down an entire octave. So before we had it at G3. So an easy way to do this is to either count -12 or +12, or to press shift up or shift down in Cubase. I'm not quite sure if it's the same in Ableton, but you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and you've got the same key, but the lower octave of that. So it'll still work with the root note. So we can go further down. So the easy way out for this type of thing, if you don't know too much about music theory and you kind of want to always have something that's going to work sonically with the other instruments in your track, is to just always work within the root note. And I know it's the lazy approach, but like I said, it's going to be much easier to create an entire track that sounds good and to work on the sound design and the mix and that kind of thing, which is, you know, also a hugely important part of music production, as much as melodies and stuff like that. But I think grasping how powerful the concept of a root note is before overcomplicating things, I think is the most powerful thing. Before complicating things and stuff like that, and, you know, when you're first getting into music production, I think stick with a root note, try create everything within that root note or octaves of that root note, and work on kind of sound design and the mix and that kind of thing. And once you've got a kind of track that sounds good altogether, maybe add in 1 or 2 leads or melodies or pads that have a changing melody. And I think the entirety of the track is just going to gel together much better than trying to overcomplicate things with complex MIDIs and then trying to gel things together with processing and that kind of thing. So let's talk about what scales or modes are. So if you look at this keyboard that I've got here, let's just concentrate on this half. So this is C, this is C. So let's concentrate on C to B, right? And a scale is, for lack of a better explanation, telling you which ones you're either allowed to or not allowed to play. So the C major scale, probably the easiest to remember, is all of the white notes from C to B. There are various ways to work out what scales do what. And the most interesting thing about a scale, I'm going to post a picture on the screen here so you can understand exactly what I'm talking about, is the steps or the gaps in between each step remains the same no matter what key you're playing it from. So C major is basically skip 1, skip one, don't skip. Skip one, skip one, skip one. So if we transpose this to a G and we want a major, it would be skip one, don't skip, skip one, skip one, skip one. So a G major actually has a minor key in it. And that's one thing that confuses a lot of people is majors can contain minors in terms of the scales and the keys as well as the chords and the scales. So one thing to just remember to make this a little bit easier is this is the reason why I transpose almost everything I do, is because I've only learnt well, not even all of them. I've only learned scales and modes in the key of C, because we can then transpose it. I'm going to explain a little bit later on exactly how that works. But because of the fact that the shape remains the same, no matter what key you play it on, it just makes it easier to transpose and that kind of thing. So my two favorite scales or modes are minor and Phrygian. Minor goes like this. And Phrygian is the same, except instead of the D, you transpose it -1, so it goes like this. That gives it a kind of like Eastern vibe, especially if you play it like down and up around the root note, something like this. So, for those who are following, different scales create different vibes, and you can transpose a scale to fit into any root note with just a little bit of, I don't want to say mathematics, with just a little bit of pre-thought. And I'm going to discuss transposing and stuff a little bit later on, but for now I want to discuss chords and harmonies and that kind of thing, which I guess is not as important with psytrance and, you know, production of electronic music in general. Although that being said, well, at least the stuff that I create on my channel and stuff, although that being said, it's an incredibly powerful tool to use in intros and breakdowns and stuff like that. It creates a lot of contrast between a very kind of monotonous bassline section. So yeah, let's dive into chords and harmonies and that kind of thing. So I'm going to skip out of this little thing that I've made for now, because I kind of want to stick to C to explain everything, because it makes it a little bit easier, but that means then I can transpose what I've got to fit into the track pretty easily, to kind of prove the point that I was trying to say a little bit earlier. So anyway, what I want to do is I want to create a melody and a chord. I think I'm just going to go with some of the built-in sounds here. Let me see if I can find something. So, like I was saying about chords, another thing to grasp is within, for example, the scale of C minor, there are some major chords. And again, that's like the confusing thing, is often people think in a minor scale that all of the sort of contents within that thing is going to be a minor thing, but that's not often the case. And I want to explain that for you guys. So if we quickly Google search chords in the key of C minor, we'll get various charts. But you'll see a couple of these: E flat major, A flat major, E flat major 7th, and all sorts. So let's just concentrate on these kind of like not so complex ones. You'll notice that quite a few of these are major chords. And I think this is one thing to kind of wrap your head around for creating more compelling sounding chord arrangements and stuff, especially for those who don't know what about music theory and stuff and stepping into it for the first time. This is hopefully going to help wrap your head around things. So let's say, for example, put in a couple of chords here. We could use Cubase's chord track, obviously, but I want to break things down for you guys to help understand things a little bit better. So the C minor chord, or the kind of basic C minor chord, is a C, a D sharp, and a G, I believe. So let's maybe like do 2 of those, and then we can do another one, like a minor in the scale. Let's see what else is here. C minor, Let's try a G minor. So like I said, if you transpose a minor, it will remain the same. And then, what was the other one? It was an E flat major, which I believe is like this. So let's just see how this sounds. So here's another thing to kind of make things a little bit easier for you guys. Yes, this key, or this chord is an E flat major chord, but if you look at all the notes that make up the chord, they're all in the scale of C minor. They've all been used before in the other chords. So hopefully that helps to kind of understand what, the major is not about what notes are in the chord, it's about the spacing in between those notes. And because I shifted this one up, this would be a E flat minor chord. However, the F sharp is not actually in the scale. So you shift it up to make it a major chord, therefore making everything in the scale of C minor. I hope you guys are following that. So here, I'm just going to make a basic kind of melody. We're not going to get too complex here. Bear in mind, now we're in the key of C minor, and so any kind of notes that we punch in over here that are in the C minor scale should technically create like a nice melody that will work alongside this chord arrangement that we've made. What I actually want to do is let's just create a thing where we can make a short melody and then just duplicate it all the way across. Let's go with something polymetric. Like this could be interesting, I think. Cool, that's sounding nice. So how now do we fit this thing that we've made into the track that we've made, which is in G? So there's various ways we can do this. Like I said, if we just simply move everything down without changing anything, if we just move it down so that instead of a C, we've got a G, that kind of like series of notes, all the distances between the notes remains the same. So the scale is the same. All we've done is we've shifted the root note of the scale. So what we're going to have to do is then do that to every part in what we've done now, or there's an easier way. We can go over here. Cubase has like a MIDI modifiers. I guess in Ableton there's ways of changing the pitch of MIDI input, and we can just shift this down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because there's 5 steps between C and G. So if we shift both of these MIDIs by -5, then this should now be in the key of G minor. So let's shift this over here, and then let's carry on this lead. Let's see how this fits in. So generally speaking, like when it drops into something like this, I like to then reduce the amount of movement in like chords and stuff to just like the root chord. And then maybe use like the chord breakdown, the entire sequence in a break. Okay, so I've explained that now. You know why transposing is so cool, but now if you understand how it works, and you kind of learn a couple of scales on a MIDI keyboard or something like that, then it makes playing to any key much easier, because now, for example, if I only know the C minor scale, but here it's transposing, so when I play a C, it's actually playing a G, and all the corresponding notes are actually playing in the G minor scale, if that makes sense. So if I hit record here and play something in a C minor, it's going to record it in and fit it into the track, which makes it a lot easier. So definitely like find a key or root note that you think is the easiest to play in. I recommend C. Learn most of the scales in that, and then you can just do this type of thing much easier. Oh, that last one was cool. Okay, it's auto-quantized it a little bit off, so we can just go in and fix that a little bit. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you like this video, then hit that like button and consider subscribing. If you want to support what I do, then check out my Patreon. There's going to be a link in the description. And yeah, I think that about sums it up. See you guys next time. Cheers.